going on, man? How are you?
I am pretty good if I can get this microphone adjusted.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So, I'm doing great. It's of course no one out there in podcast listener land can know that we're having our first big snowy day of the year, but
Right. Yeah, it's cold.
yeah, but it's warm and toasty in here.
Yeah, it's not too bad. Not too bad.
So, we made it, huh? All through all our steps.
Yeah, can you believe it? So we've done, I think this is our 25th episode, so we are all the way through all the steps.
Wow.
It's amazing. So 3 phases, 24 total steps. It's great. We nailed it.
We should do a quiz for our listeners to see who watched all the steps.
I guarantee nobody watched them all except those diehards that really want to make money
Right.
and learn how to start their own business, which I hope there's a lot of them out there.
Well, I pushed it to somebody yesterday, who's starting a roofing business. I said, hey, go watch all of our steps and you'll avoid a lot of the mistakes that people usually make.
Yeah. Well, it's not a guarantee for success, but I'll tell you that almost every business that I've ever seen fail has missed one of the steps that we went through. They dropped the ball somewhere and didn't plan, didn't prepare, and they cost them a lot of money. So if you go through them, you certainly have a good chance of success, or at least we hope so.
Well, there you go, folks.
I'm Scott Hess, tax and business consultant.
I'm John Barton, small business owner. Remember the tortoise and the hare? Slow and steady wins the race.
We started Turtlesmith to help people start small businesses, providing information and resources to small business owners and entrepreneurs.
Build a solid foundation and forge your dreams. So what we're going to do now, we're going to kind of recap all the steps real quick.
Yeah. Just spend a couple minutes on each one, just kind of making sure that we talk about the order and why we were in that order and recap the end goals. And then we'll be done with the steps. Next episodes, we'll be doing something different. So be excited.
All right. Well, let's get going.
So there's 3 phases. The first one is plan, where you're going to develop your full-on business plan, a really comprehensive business plan that gives you the step-by-step kind of guide for how you're going to be successful. Phase 2 is prepare, getting all your ducks in a row, putting everything together, and getting ready to launch your business. And then in phase 3, we execute. And so phase 3 is when we launch our business. It's pretty long, each of the phases, and each of the steps can be kind of difficult. Some are easy for some people, some will be harder for others, but it really is important to go through them all. So,
well, I just want to interject real quick.
Free.
So everybody watching this, right? You got to understand that the better you plan for starting your business, the better chance that you're going to have to build a solid business that you can run for decades into the future. Mm-hmm. Or build it up to where it's attractive enough to someone else to buy it for a nice profit for you. This is a lot of the things that people don't do when they start a new business. Now, if you're watching and you've watched all this, then you know all this, but we're going to reiterate it anyway because this might be the first video that you see from us. Mm-hmm. So we want to, let you know that it's important to go back and look at all of these things. A lot of this has to do with things that I didn't do when I started my business, and as a result, I made a lot of mistakes that cost a lot of money, things that could have sunk us many times along the way, things that actually did sink me in my previous business. So take it away.
In phase 1, we're planning. So our step 1 is to generate an elevator pitch. You come up with your business idea, and the end goal of this step is your elevator pitch. Why we do that first? An elevator pitch is typically your sales pitch that you give to customers or to your suppliers or lenders. The reason we want to do that first is because most businesses do not have a defined goal. They just jump into it thinking, all right, we're just going to buy low, sell high, try to make some money in between. And it often fails because they just don't have a goal. And so by doing the elevator pitch first, you want to narrow your business focus down to a razor edge and have a good target for what you're doing. So exactly what your business is going to be doing or selling or providing to a customer is what you're generating in this first step. And this is one that you'll need to go back to. Go back to this elevator pitch after every step or after every phase and refine it and define it. And then one more thing on the elevator pitch is you want to think that you're going to have 4 of them. You're going to have 1 for customers, 1 for your employees, 1 for your suppliers, and then 1 for your lenders. And they're all a little bit different. Step 2 is become an expert. And I think this is where people really slack. They know maybe how to do the specific thing that they're wanting to do, but they're not an expert in the industry or the business as a whole. Now, when you started, you knew a lot about billiards, but not a lot about the business side of billiards probably. And that's where it cost you. Yeah.
I also didn't know a lot about leather working or case making and stuff like that, and I just jumped in. And as a result, as we've talked about on the podcast, those things cost me a lot. Buying the wrong materials, buying the wrong types of sewing machines that were not good for the materials that I did have, so that sort of stuff. So, those are mistakes that luckily I was able to weather, but not without difficulty.
Yeah. Well, and it can take a lifetime to become an expert. Do you feel like you're an expert now on the billiards industry, or at least the case-making portion of things?
Yes, I consider myself so much of an expert that I am often sought out for advice, and I help other case makers to avoid the traps that I got into or avoid the mistakes that I made when I was first building. And give them techniques that they wouldn't necessarily be able to find on their own.
Yeah. Well, now, if you're just starting out, you might not be a full-on expert, but this is the time to really slow down and at least know everything that you need to learn and at least have a basic understanding of the industry and the goal of your business before moving forward.
And it's even easier today than it ever has been in the past because you have...
Oh, yeah, YouTube teaches all.
You have YouTube, you have unlimited groups, you've got lots and lots of entrepreneurs that have been doing it for 20 years that are willing to share if you just talk to them.
Yep. And if you go through the Turtlesmith plan, you'll be kind of an expert in making a business go.
So. I mean, just yesterday, I saved about $1,000 by replacing the battery on my car by using YouTube.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
It took me about 30 minutes.
Nice. So step 3 is market research. And this is where we want to really identify, is there a market for my product or service? So in this one, we really identify what is the ideal customer, the geographic location of those customers, the demographic, are we mostly to men, mostly to women, mostly to younger, mostly to older? And we try to define the size of our market to make sure that there's people who are going to buy our product. You might have a great idea for a product, but maybe it's some kind of kitchen gadget that only 6 chefs in the whole world are going to use. There's not much of a market for your business. So this is where you want to really narrow down into the industry and the market size of your potential product or service. The next step is the feasibility study, and this is where we do a little bit of math for the first time. Here is where we want to just kind of ballpark whether we can feasibly make this business work. So you and I do that a lot when we're kind of scheming and dreaming on little business ideas. We kind of do quick feasibility studies before we even decide to move forward. So we're working on a couple projects right now that we've decided are maybe feasible, one's maybe not feasible. We'll see. So a lot of little bits of math before you kind of drill down, but you want to make sure that things are reasonable before you move forward. So this is where you'll find, get quotes on supplies, get quotes on your equipment, kind of do the math on what you think you could sell your product for, how much it's going to cost you. And most importantly in this one, we really want to think about time. Time is the most valuable asset for business owners. I'm always running out of time. I don't know about you, but...
All the time.
Yeah, fair enough.
So it's important to remember that, Field of Dreams is a movie. It's not a build it and they will come sort of situation. That very, very rarely happens in the real world. Mm-hmm. So in the real world, you have to really know your numbers and know whether there's enough people out there to support what you want to do and really calculate conservatively.
Yep.
Because if you calculate really conservatively, then everything that comes over and above those amount of people coming to your business is a bonus. Because you've already calculated that you can run a successful business with your conservative estimates, and then you can be pleasantly surprised when it ends up being more than that.
Yep, absolutely. The next step is brand development. And here's where we want to really think about what does our product, what does our company say to the consumer? And that's something I've always been kind of weak on, and you've been real great on, is really customer perception. Is like when people walk in your door or people see the name or the logo, what are they going to feel about it? Are they excited? Is your brand a positive brand? Is it an intimidating brand? Is it welcoming? Is it cold? Is it exclusive? These are the kind of things you have to think of during brand development. Next one is concept development. Step 6 in phase 1 is concept development. This is one that everybody skips. Every single person that I have helped start a business or done their books for, this is always something that comes way later. But the end goal of this step is to build a training manual. Have a standard operating procedures on paper for literally everything that you do. It's I can't say enough how helpful this step is. If you just get on paper exactly what you're going to be doing every time you have an action in your business. We're actually working on a training manual, employee handbook, stuff like that for our companies now, and we were slacking on it before.
You can look at that as kind of an FAQ for your business as well. Frequently asked questions. It can be a living document.
It should be.
Because you're never going to have a situation where everything that can possibly happen has happened. So, just be prepared that there should be kind of a step. There should be a development of a logical set of steps of how to approach a problem, whatever it is, or a situation.
Yep.
I try to train my daughters in this way. I tell them, problems are not something that you need to be scared of, but you need to be prepared for them. And
that's good advice.
And I say, so everyone has issues. Things happen. Things don't always go the way we want. So how do we solve it? What do we do, right? What are the things that are going to help? What are the things that are going to make it worse?
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, getting upset, storming off, throwing tantrums, breaking things makes it worse.
Right.
Right?
Is that a common problem in the Barton household?
With me, yes.
Fair enough.
So there's a lot of do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
There, I say, well, use me as a bad example.
Yeah.
But that's that's basically what this comes down to is trying to anticipate the things that can go wrong, anticipate the things that are happening correctly, like how do you handle holidays, things like that.
Yeah.
And these are things that small businesses don't think about a lot of times.
Correct. Yeah, they just kind of take them as they come rather than think ahead, which is what we're trying to reiterate, is that you should try to think ahead as much as possible before you get going. And the kind of final point of this step 2 is, as you do all of your planning and your standard operating procedures, you can also get a baseline for the equipment and supplies, space, and time that you're going to need to execute all of these problems and all of these actions that you need in your business. Nope. There you go. So step 7 is marketing strategy and sales approach. So the end goal is to develop a strategy to kind of get your first customer. So in previous step in the market research, we kind of identified who our ideal customer is. And in this step, we want to see what kind of advertising avenues do we want to pursue in order to find them. So lots of different ways, depending on your business and your industry, there's going to be some standards. Email marketing campaigns, social media is obviously a no-brainer. You have to have that for almost anything. But we really talk about, especially for services and business-to-business stuff, cold calls, meaning showing up on doorsteps, calling business owners, getting in their face. Those are really the best way to pursue business clients rather than just trying to email a bunch of people. Those marketing campaigns have a very low success rate.
It's also important to understand the difference between advertising and marketing.
Good point, yeah.
Advertising is, hey, we're here, and marketing is, this is what we want you to think about us.
Correct.
And people often interchange those two things, but it is worth it to go out and study the differences between them, because a lot of people will say, I do marketing, meaning they placed a couple ads, and then they complain that they didn't get the right response.
Yeah.
When in fact, marketing includes ads and other activities
Yep.
to get people thinking about your business in a certain way and having a certain type of feeling about your business.
Yep. Absolutely. And you want to really utilize all that information from your market research and your brand development. That's how those combine into marketing, and then also to decide what advertising channels to use. The next step, step 8 in phase 1, is financial planning. Now this one, it always is kind of the worst for some people who don't like numbers, but this is where you really need to drill down, get some spreadsheets going, and really do the math. Do your projections, do kind of all your numbers, your projections on revenue, your projections on your profit, and try to get everything out as you can. You will likely find that your business, excuse me, you'll likely find that your business is not going to make money in the first year or so. Sorry, I need a drink. I'm going to choke for a minute. Sorry. So you'll likely find that your business is not going to be profitable in the first year or 18 months, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it's not feasible or it's not a good plan. A lot of businesses start slow, losing money, and then they build.
Well, a very common mistake, I want to say, is going back to the build it and they will come mentality, right? The people that think that they're going to be making money right out of the gate. Again, that is very rare that happens, that you're just profitable from day one. There are obviously things that you can do where that might happen, but most of the time there's going to be all the expenses leading up to it that you have to factor into it, Mm-hmm. So if you sell your first widget and, it's got a 50% profit margin, well, yes, you made a profit on that widget, but you did not make a profit in your business yet.
Right.
Which is important to understand, right? Mm-hmm. So this is where you start to understand those numbers. And they can be very sobering, because if you do it correctly and diligently and conservatively, then you will start to identify, okay, maybe this isn't going to work the way I want it to, but since I know the numbers, let me tweak this or that properly and conservatively, and rationally. And you can find that you'll be able to weather those down months, weather that time when you're not really making a profit in your business, but you'll understand that if you're breaking even, you're doing pretty good at that point at the beginning of your business.
Yep. Yeah, breaking even is always the first goal.
Right.
So we have a bunch of spreadsheets and kind of step-by-step guides for building this financial planning on the website, so be sure to check it out. But that'll help you kind of walk through what you need to do. Your financial planning, your monthly cash burn, your pro formas for projections, all available on turtlesmith.com. The last step is put it all together in plan in our phase 1, and this is where we really put together a comprehensive business plan. We add our market research, our brand development, our concept development, and our financial planning, marketing, and sales approach all into a comprehensive business plan. And we have a few examples online. There are SBA-approved business plans. There are industry business plans, all available online to kind of walk you through and how to put those together. But this is where you have your comprehensive plan. So you should have pitch decks, loan asks if you need lender, if you need money from a bank or investors or whatever, they'll all be available, those kind of documents. And at the end of this phase, you should have a really solid business plan, hopefully. Everything you need to move on to phase 2.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine if somebody goes through all this that they're going to be unprepared at this point.
Yeah, this really puts it together. So in the next phase, which is our prepare phase, step 1 is funding. And you don't necessarily need to get your funding completely secured, but you need to know where it's going to come from in this step. So a lot of options. We talked about bank loans a little bit, but there are SBA loans you can get. You can get a direct loan from your bank if you have collateral. You might be self-funding this and putting it right out of your own savings. You might be a crazy person and putting a van on a credit card to start out. I don't know. But this is where you really need to understand where your funding is going to come from. In the last phase in your business plan, we should have what we need for our startup capital, what we need for operating expenses for the first 6 to 8 months. And so this is where you need to find it. And again, we have some funding request documents and different tips for finding investors and those kind of things on the website. But be careful in this step. Really think about where you want your money to come from.
It's always better elevator pitch.
Yeah, it's always better to use other people's money if you can, but sometimes you got to use your own, especially if it's a wild idea.
Right.
Step 2 is licensing. So again, here we don't necessarily have to have all of our licensing, but we need to know what kind of licensing that you need to operate your business. And I kind of had a pipe dream when we first started talking about this business of getting a matrix set up where you could say, I'm a plumber in Bozeman, Montana, and it would come up with all the licenses and permits you need. That was a fool's errand. 50 states, it's ridiculous how many different licenses and permits there are. So my suggestion is to just call your city and ask, or look on their website or try to dig in. But every state, every county, and every city has different rules and regulations and different governing bodies for what licenses and permits you need. So this can be a headache depending on what kind of business you're in.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this before, but when I first moved here, I tried to hire a plumber, a Bethany plumber, to go and do the plumbing at my house in Midwest City because I had a problem. And he says, I'm not licensed in Midwest City. Midwest City is 10 miles away, I didn't know that there was such a thing. I thought if you're a plumber in a state, you're pretty much can be a plumber anywhere in the state.
Right, and I guess that is not the case for a lot of professions, particularly ones that need licenses like that.
So I would say to that the important part there may be to hook up with your state associations or any groups that trade groups, experienced people, for example, as well as the city, as you said, and see where the best place where you can get that information, because not having a proper license will sink you if you are operating without one.
Right.
It can range from something as simple as a warning, go get your license, or it could be something as drastic as shutting you down completely and putting you completely out of business, where they say, sorry, you're not even allowed to do this business anymore.
Yeah. I think in some industries it's even a crime. So you might be in jail or getting sued for fraud if you're
right.
not.
So a very important step. Don't skip it.
Yeah, figure out what license you need for sure. And one thing we did talk about too that I just want to reiterate is the sales tax and permits under that. We talked specifically about nexuses. Definitely check out the website or listen to that podcast if you need more information. You can have both a physical nexus, which means an actual location, and an economic nexus, which means you sell enough in that state to need certain licenses. So be very cognizant of what permits you might need. Even if you're in Oklahoma like we are, you might need a sales tax permit in other states that charge sales tax. So
right.
And you might need licensing in other states.
Yeah. It's a complex myriad of stuff, but all of that came about through the rise of e-commerce, and especially through Amazon.
Yeah.
So it used to be that you sold interstate commerce, you did not have to pay taxes at your destination. But now you do sometimes have to collect tax and remit it to the jurisdictions where you're selling to.
Right. So just pay attention to those and really dig in. We talk a lot more about that on our episode and on the Turtlesmith website.
There are software packages that keep abreast of all that, though, 100%. So that can help you with that.
Yep, absolutely. Next step, my favorite step, but probably everybody else's least favorite, is the accounting step. Again, you do not need to be an expert in accounting, but it is very important to at least learn the basic forms and how they're created. So we talk about the profit and loss form, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows. Those are the big ones. And it's really important to just understand what those are, how they're created, so that you can have intelligent conversations with your tax preparer or with whoever's going to be handling your books. If you just kind of let somebody run it for you, you can, but it's expensive and it's not as great. You really should know what's going on in your business.
Most of the successful business owners that I know have a pretty good finger on the pulse of their accounting. You know, and throughout my time with you, I have come to understand how important it is to know those numbers.
Yeah.
Especially when you're trying to make a decision, right, about what the next move is in your business, whether it's okay to buy a new machine or buy a building or something like that, you know.
Right.
Without that understanding, then a big number like $1 million seems just completely out of reach.
Yeah.
But once you have understanding of your numbers and you have the benefit of an expert accountant, then it becomes within reach because you learn how you can do it, you know, and you learn if your business isn't already in a position where a bank looks at you favorably, you learn what you need to do to get your business in that position.
Yep. Yep. We also talk a little bit in this step about the right time to hire an accountant. That's going to kind of vary business to business and industry to industry. It's hard to say exactly, but I almost always suggest that anybody who has a small business, even if they're just doing a little bit, has an accountant or a tax professional file their taxes at the end of the year. Don't try to do your own taxes on TurboTax if you have a business. You're going to miss out on stuff. It's not as great.
0 out of 10, very bad.
Well, it works really well for people with simpler taxes, but if you do have a business, it's worth a few $100 or even $500 to pay an accountant to just do it for you. That way you're all square.
Would have saved me a couple $100,000.
Probably. Next step is employment. And here, again, we talk just about understanding the basics of employment. There's a few rules and regulations that you as a business owner need to be aware of. One that we talk about, excuse me, I'm going to choke again.
So you're not allowed to ask a person's age, apparently. Not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to ask them how it feels to be black. You're not allowed to ask them their opinion on 1,000 bottles of baby oil.
Jesus. Sorry, guys. This dry weather is making me...
Hey, if you're going to choke on your words, I'm going to jump in with my comments. So
Feel
just let
free.
you know.
Feel free. So the next step 4, is employment. Again, you don't have to be an expert in employees or the payroll taxes or anything like that. This step just gives us a basic understanding of some of the rules and regulations that you as a business owner need to know. The most important one at the very beginning is what is an independent contractor versus an employee. Now, a lot of business owners don't want employees because it does cost a little bit more in payroll taxes to have employees on your books rather than just paying them a straight wage as an independent contractor. But there's some rules. You know, it really depends on your financial and control and how much control you have over the work that is done of the employee or the worker to be whether they're an independent contractor or an employee. And if you pay incorrectly, big penalties, really big penalties. So make sure that you're fully aware of whether your workers are independent contractors or employees.
And, you know, a lot of people will tell you, you know, just make them an independent contractor. Trust me. Not only can you get big penalties and everything, but you also run the risk of getting sued by the person that you made an independent contractor because they were actually an employee.
Yeah, they can file a form directly with the IRS, and you can get hit pretty hard with some penalties. A couple other little basic things we talk about, like HR stuff, a few joking examples that you put before, but things that you shouldn't be asking during the interview. You know, you can't ask them their age. You can't ask them certain questions that would seem to eliminate them based on discrimination. So, a lot more information, and again, on the website, and you don't have to be an expert. You're just the basics here. We're just trying to understand basic employment law and basic rules and regulations. The next step is develop a scaling strategy. And this is where we really want to dream big. We want to plan for what our future is going to look like. What is our business? Once we break even, once we get comfortable and we're paying ourselves a good wage, what does year 3 look like? What does year 5 look like? What does year 20 look like? And this is where we really try to make a very big plan for our company. And we want to develop a scaling strategy. And we want to try to go out as far as possible because the bigger plans that we have means the decisions that we're making now is going to inform what we're doing. So the steps that we take today will inform the plan for our scaling strategy will inform the decisions that we make today to try to build into that. And so we've got some more information on Turtlesmith about scaling strategies and the different projection models that you need to help get you there. And I apologize, but we actually missed a step. Step 5 is actually insurance, and that's one that we kind of threw in there after I had already made this, and because I think it's skipped over too often. A lot of people go without insurance when they really need it. So we have a long list of different insurances that you can get for your business and kind of what each does. Most of the time you just need like an umbrella business policy, but there are some very specific ones depending on what industry you're in. So a lot of tips on the different types of insurance, and then of course where the best place to get it is. And our recommendation is always an independent insurance agent who can quote multiple companies. That's how you always get the best deal. So that was actually step 5 is insurance. Step 6 is the develop scaling strategy. Step 7 is going to be the business formation. So this is where we decide what type of business we're going to be running, an LLC or corporation. And then we can look at, is it an LLP or something like that? We have all the different the different company types on the website, and we talk really in depth about the pros and cons of each one. We sort of recommend here that if you're a small business and you're just getting started, limited liability company is all you need. You can get that with your Secretary of State. Do not do an S corporation. Do not do a C corp. Do not do an LLP or anything like that unless you have really good advice and help from an accountant or an attorney. Otherwise, an LLC is all you need.
We should interject right now, though, that there is a new law that is very important. That is the notification of beneficial ownership.
Yeah, it's the BOIR, Beneficial Ownership Information Reports.
So if you do an LLC, you have to file that form so that the government knows who the beneficiary is of this LLC. And
most likely. Actually, as of today that we're recording this, that requirement is suspended.
Has it been?
Yeah,
okay,
you don't actually have to file them. But I bet by the time it releases, there's going to be a court hearing and that decision might change. So.
Well, stay on top of it,
For
because
sure.
apparently this is something where, again, you can end up accruing a fine of something like $500 a day.
That's correct.
Per day that you haven't done it.
Yeah. And that's actually filed with the FinCEN, FINCEN, the U.S. Treasury's Financial Crimes Network. So wild stuff. But yeah, definitely pay attention to that. And then again, our last step in phase 2, prepare, is put it all together, just like in phase 1. That's our last step. We just want to put everything together. Here's where we're going to actually apply for our funding, get that going, get all of our licenses, get our business formed, and get everything prepared to launch our business.
There you go.
And in phase 3, we execute. So here's where we start our business.
Start
Step
making
1,
some money.
Set up your operations. Here's where you set everything up. Get your business as close to ready to open as you possibly can. If you have a physical location, get all the stuff in there. If it's an office, you need your desk and your chairs and your cubicle walls or whatever you need. If you're a retail store, you got to get all your showcases and racks and everything in there. And here's where you really want to pay attention to your customer perception. So you only get one chance to make a first impression. If you have a shitty location, people walk in or they're uncomfortable walking in or it's dirty, that's the reputation you're going to have. So maybe that's what you want if you have a dive bar. Those are supposed to be dirty. But if you have a nice retail shop or you have an accounting office, you need to have a really presentable place for people to come.
This is also where you run through practice. You practice, you draft your family and friends, and you role play. You go through all of your procedures and how you're going to handle sales and where things are and whether you're tripping over things, because what you don't want is you don't want customers confused. You don't want your staff confused. You want everything to run like clockwork. This is it.
Yeah, and we have some more information on theturtlesmith.com and in one of our episodes where we talk pretty in depth about soft openings versus grand openings. And depending on what kind of business you do, we always suggest like a friends and family night. My brother has a tasting room, so he's getting ready to open. He has he's having a friends and family night soon where his girlfriend and their whole family of lots of cousins come and really just put them through the ringer. Come in, do everything that he's going to be doing for regular customers, and so that way he can make sure he has everything he needs. So
it's very important, to know where you're at with these things. Like Scott said, you only get one chance to make a first impression. So you're going to try to make it as good as you possibly can. Now realize you're not always going to get everything right despite the best preparations. But my one piece of advice here would be don't overcomplicate things. I tend to overcomplicate things when I'm thinking up a new program or a new tournament or something, and I'll I'll have the microphone, and I'll realize about halfway through my spiel that everyone's eyes have glazed over, because they don't really want to hear a paragraph about whatever this thing is.
Yep. Yeah, short and sweet.
Yeah.
That's the move. So after you get your operations all set up, ready to go, you've tested everything out. Step 2 is our first customers. So this is where we make our first sale to non-family and friends, somebody outside of your network. This is where you really narrow in on your advertising to make sure that your marketing campaign's good, your advertising channels are good, and you're bringing people in. Lots of different tips on how to find those first customers and get them. It really depends on your industry,
and celebrate them. Record it, celebrate it, keep it somewhere, and say, record your milestones.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of firsts that I did in my businesses that I didn't record because I was too wrapped up in the moment. And now I wish that I had. I don't know who my first customer was.
Well, that's why you often see companies, they'll have that dollar bill up on their wall. I don't know if that's still a thing. It used to be.
It is some places. Yeah, you'll still see that.
No. Step 3 is where we establish our feedback loop. And so this is very important. You want to know what your customers think about you. So in this step, we talk about getting reviews on Google or Yelp or wherever, Facebook, if you are one of those kind of businesses, or just establishing some type of way to get feedback from your customers. Send them out surveys, questions, or just ask them directly, how are we doing? Is there something we can improve on? This is where you want to create kind of the feedback loop to get more information for your business so that you can always be improving. Step 4, financial analysis. Now here we get a little bit more into the accounting stuff and narrowing down on how to analyze the profit and loss, how to analyze the balance sheet, how to analyze cash flow, and see where we're succeeding and where we're failing. So financial analysis is really important, and it needs to be an ongoing thing for all small businesses. But here's where we kind of learn about it, and we learn to get it set up so that we can be analyzing how we're doing every day.
And this is another time where we remind you again that revenue is not profit. Sales is not profit. I made $1 million in sales does not mean you made $1 million in profit.
Right. Which is people are often confused about. The next one, step 5, is stay ahead of the curve. This is where we come up with our plans B, C, D, to try to come up with different ways to pivot if things are going poorly, and also to really think about industry changes, market changes, economic changes, what is coming down the pipeline, and what's going to affect my business. There are too many companies that were sitting on the high horse, just riding along, and then something came down the pipe and just knocked them right off. They were the best in the business, and now they're nothing because they didn't stay ahead of the curve. I think we used Sears as a big example. They had everything they needed to be Amazon. They had the infrastructure, they had the stores, they had all the supply lines, and they just did not think the internet was a thing.
That is just still one of the craziest stories to me.
Yeah. They were the catalog people. Why would they not think that internet was the
Yeah, they were in every home.
Yep.
Yeah,
and they should have been Amazon.
When I was a kid, we were so happy to get the new Sears catalog and start planning in summer what we wanted for Christmas.
Yep. Yeah, now I'm sure there's a bunch of other reasons why they didn't succeed in that realm, but really, if you're not staying ahead of what's coming, you're going to fail. And right now, we're all thinking about this new what is the future going to look like with AI? Everybody's talking about it. Are we all still going to have jobs? I feel like accounting and taxes is going to be pretty easy to do with an artificial intelligence. They'll just knock it all out for you. But
that may be true, but I don't like the types of conversations that you and I have had are
probably going to be even better with ChatGPT.
I doubt it. I doubt it, because I think that there's certain ways that you go about looking at it that are the way you intuitively use and explain the numbers. I think is something that it's going to take a while before AI can really figure that out. On a human to human level. It's like what does a cherry taste like?
Yeah, that's true.
AI will never be able to tell me that, right? It will, at best, it could only have some kind of catalog description of what its sensor thinks, gives it. But you and I can operate on that level. I eat a cherry, you eat a cherry. We have a common language and a common intuition. And the same thing applies with these numbers and things like that. So yes, AI will be able to do the bookkeeping and the accounting. But I don't know that it will be able to replace the advice.
I agree with that, but it's no question that there are some jobs, some companies that AI is going to be quickly replacing in the future.
But the main point here is that it's something that must be thought about, regardless of what your business is, right? If you're a person that mows lawns for a living and you've got a great lawn care service, and somebody comes in with an AI that can make appointments and send out a fleet of lawn care robots, right? Then obviously your lawn care business is probably going to be in trouble.
Yep.
So maybe you want to be the one to deploy the AI and the robots first.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just AI. There's a lot of little technology changes. And then you also have to think about just the economy in general. We go through peaks and valleys. And if your business is not a necessity, if it's a luxury, it may not survive in those recessions.
That's true.
The next step, one of the most important ones, I think, is mental health. I know a lot of business owners. A lot of them suffer from anxiety. A lot of them suffer from depression. A lot of them turn to very bad coping mechanisms, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, social media addiction, all kinds of stuff that is just not good for you. So having a good mental health plan and a good self-care plan in place is vitally important. You got to make sure you're getting, good meals. I'm working on it myself, trying to eat a little bit better so my brain works better. Get the exercise in, get the sleep, and just try not to burn yourself out, because that burnout is very easy to do as a small business owner.
And you cannot lubricate away your problems with 1,000 bottles of baby oil.
Jesus Christ. That guy lives in your head, doesn't he?
Absolutely, man. I just can't. I can never get over the image that I saw, of this and what went with it. So,
all right.
So don't ever get yourself to a point where you're living in such a fantasy land and burning yourself out that you end up doing things that are harmful to yourself and to others.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to get to here. So take care of yourself.
Absolutely. And just as a little bit kind of end note, we always want to talk about improving every single day. That's what our next couple segments in this episode are going to be about. But always be improving. Always try to be a little bit better today than you were yesterday.
Right. Yeah.
And that's it for the phases. If you listen to all of them, I applaud you. Great work.
This episode is sponsored by JB Cases. JB Cases is a pool cue case company specializing in custom cases. They have been in business since 2007, and their motto is true protection, true durability, true comfort, and true custom. Visit them at jbcases.com.
Well, we're back for our second segment talking about how to be lean, right?
Yeah. You know what Kaizen means?
Kaizen? Huh.
Kaizen is a Japanese word. It basically translates to continuous improvement or always be improving.
Well, if anybody knows how to be efficient, it's those guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about lean. manufacturing or just lean processes in business.
Mm-hmm.
And since we've just wrapped up, all of our phases and our steps, this is something that I wish that I had incorporated, or even known about back when I was 22 years old, starting my business, my first business, or when I was 25 or 28 and starting my second business.
Yeah.
At any time.
Yeah.
Because it's much easier to implement this from the beginning than it is to change a culture that doesn't have it.
And a lot of these things that I've read before, and a lot of things we're going to talk about are, in manufacturing or building things, but these can really be translated to almost any industry.
Yeah.
I use the ideas of these things on a daily basis in my business.
Sure, and a lot of people do because a lot of these concepts have made their way into mainstream thinking, and they're not new. It's just like when we talk about lean manufacturing, a lot of times people will use Toyota as the gold standard, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
They're the so-called Toyota production system.
Yeah, which is very efficient.
And other people will call it just-in-time manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
But what it really translates to is work smarter, not harder. It translates into being more efficient in your production. So for a small business owner, that translates into being more efficient with the use of your time.
Yep.
And looking at all of your processes and saying, where can I shave off the waste? Waste is basically the central thing with lean production, right? So it's it's just exactly as it sounds, right? So if you're thinking about a piece of meat and you want to make it lean, you cut off the fat, right?
Yep.
And that's really what it is you're cutting out the fat in your business, and you're doing it on a continual basis. Yeah. But it's not just you that's doing it. It's also, you want to try to bring along your people that are in the business with you, your employees, your managers, just anybody that has a stake in it. You want to make it a much better place for them to be at. And you do this by looking at all the different processes and the way you do things and cutting out the fat and cutting out the waste. And every single one of us in our lives, we have so much waste.
Yeah.
There's hardly anybody who's truly as efficient as they could be, and a lot of times people will say, well, I don't want to cut out all my fun in life either, right? That's true too. But you'll find that if you're much more efficient in your business, that leaves you a lot more time for the fun stuff.
Right, which is the point.
Yeah. And that's including for your employees, for your company, for your customers.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of great things once you've achieved the time savings.
Right.
Now you can go spend that time on cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and the waste, the most important one is time, because we talk about that being time is the greatest asset of all business owners. But also when we look at these processes, we want to make sure that we're cutting down on wasted materials, raw inventory, excess inventory, supplies, those kind of things.
Calvin, can you scroll up just a little bit, please? Down a little bit, sorry. So there are 8 main categories of waste. This particular graphic says the 8 deadly sins of waste, but it's basically it starts with overproduction, overprocessing, excess inventory, waiting time, defects, transportation, wasted motion, waiting time, and unused employee genius or resources or thinking. So let me just run through those real quick, okay?
Yeah, feel free.
So basically, overproduction means that you're producing a lot of, and this is related mostly to manufacturing at this moment, but it can apply in different ways to different types of businesses. But it basically means producing more of something than you need. And a lot of people do this because they're anticipating demand. So they'll produce a lot of things, use up a lot of resources, And that's going to lead into the next phase, which is over-processing, because now you've got all these things that you've made, and you've spent all this time making it. That production time and how you've done it, the production methods you've used have not necessarily been as efficient as they can be. So that's all tied to all that extra stuff that you produced.
I have a fun thought on those, the
Okay.
overproduction and overprocessing. I think I've told you before, I'm a monster D&D fan, love Dungeons & Dragons. Well, I usually run the games, and about 90% of the time, I create these elaborate stories that my players just completely don't even pay attention to. They just miss it. So I spend all this time doing extra work that doesn't even get used.
Overproduction.
Yeah, and so it happens so often, even in that space. So we're not only talking about manufacturing, even just some of the work I do for my accounting business, I'll put in extra steps, or I'll do some accounting stuff that just doesn't need to be done. I'll produce, more comprehensive financial statements that the client just doesn't care about. They just want to see the taxable number. They don't care how we got there.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that too. I've done the same thing similar for tournaments and things like that. I've gone out and bought all these neat things that I thought the players could use.
Yeah.
Or I've produced these sheets, scoring sheets that nobody uses.
Right. Yeah, and that's not to say that you don't want to try to give your customers the absolute best that you can give them, but sometimes it just doesn't make that big a difference. So you just want to do a lot of employees will say this, they just want to work as little as possible without getting fired. You as a business owner, you should try to do just the right amount so that you make everybody happy while still, making them happy. You know what I'm saying? So,
right. So
anyway,
this
sorry
leads
to interrupt.
into the third one, which is excess inventory, right? So now you've got this inventory and you've got to store it. You got to make sure it, doesn't go bad. Leak in the roof, ruins half your inventory, that sort of thing. Then you go with defects. Well, what if all that inventory has some part of it has defects in it? Now you've got to sit there and rework it. You got to pull it down, or you send it out to customers. Now you've got to take it all back in, right?
Yep.
So if you're not wasting time and resources on overproduction, overprocessing, and excess inventory, that means that you don't run that risk of having a lot of product that you just made up that now you can't sell, or you have to spend a lot of time fixing.
Yeah. And I've run into the deal in my business too, where I've just done the same thing. I've done something, but I just did it wrong. And so then I have to redo it all the time. So I always try to just take that extra step to really think about what you're going to do, and then you won't have those defects. Planning.
So I'll give you an example of that in my business, right? So I am not the best sewer. But I do know how to run a sewing machine. But since I don't do it very often, I let my skills lapse.
Yeah.
And letting my skills lapse means that now I get down to do something and I've got to spend a lot of extra time relearning things that I should already know. Where if I would simply just practice a little bit each month, and just keep my mind sharp and stay sharp with it, then I could just jump right in and do what I need to do.
Yeah. And probably that time that you spent practicing and doing the actual task is less than having to go back and relearn it all and fix your mistakes. It absolutely
is. And also it cuts down on the frustration, because the frustration kills the desire.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes things twice as hard and twice as long.
Right. So there's ways that these can apply in every business.
Yep, absolutely.
The next thing is transportation. Well, now you've got all this excess inventory. Now you got to move it from place to place. Moving things from place to place is the bane of my existence at this point.
Yeah.
Seriously, I have so much extra crap in my garage that is really not necessary. Things that I'm just, a lot of it I'll never use. A lot of it I have never used, just being a pack rat. And now if I need something, I've got most of my stuff on wheels, so I can at least move carts from one place to another. But
one of my very first jobs, I worked at this place called Atwood's, which I think is just a local place here in Oklahoma. I don't know how big they are, but the manager these feed bags would come on pallets, and he hated pallets in the store. So I'd have to wheel the pallet over to the display, and then I would have to move all the bags off the pallet onto the steel when I could have just wheeled the pallet in and it would have been done. It was the most ridiculous thing. I hated that job.
Wow,
I did get in
you're
good
not
shape,
you're
though.
not you're not so old that Costco and Sam's were not a thing.
No, they were a thing. It's just
And
this manager hated them. He liked us to move them onto the display.
so that is a perfect example of waste, right?
Yeah.
So he's wasted the human resource that has to move that and everything in a type of store where people just really honestly don't care.
No, nobody cared at all.
As a matter of fact, I would bet that there were probably customers who came in and were like, pick that whole thing up on a pallet and put it in my truck,
Right.
on my trailer,
Yeah.
right? And now they got to stack it on a pallet or
Yeah.
find a pallet. So that is a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
So transportation, moving stuff around, and unnecessarily, because now you got to do something with all this inventory. So if you can produce it and go straight from production to delivery, that's going to be your most efficient line of transportation, rather than move it to this place, move it to that place, package it at this place, and so on and so on. Okay, the next one is wasted motion. All right, this is a big one in lean. Whatever you're doing, right? So you're in accounting, you've got printers, for example, you've got printer paper and things like that. So anytime someone has to print something, how hard is it for them to get up and go get it, for example, from the printer? Do they have to walk very far? Would it be better if each person had a printer, for example? Or, it's just different things like that and I'm not saying that it would or would not be better. I'm just saying it's analyzing all of the motions that you're taking to do tasks to find out which of those is actually wasting time.
No, I'm with you. I bought multiple printers at my office just so I don't have to get up when I'm printing checks and stuff, because it makes it so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, and just using that as an example, one of the things I've always hated in places where we've had a central printer is printing and not knowing whether it actually printed out right and getting all the way over there and finding out it didn't print out right.
Yeah.
And now you got to try to troubleshoot not only the printer itself, but the connection between them and everything, and it just gets to be a hassle.
The worst for me at a big office was when 8 people printed to the same, and so then and they didn't go get their stuff right away. So there'd be somebody stacked up, then yours would go, and then somebody else would be on top of you, and you have to dig through all your crap.
And I can see how that would be a problem. You were in a bigger accounting firm before, right?
It's a nightmare.
Yeah. So wasted motion, and believe me, in just about every endeavor, there's lots of ways that you can find wasted motion.
You showed me a couple of those little videos on people just doing simple tasks and then trying to find the most efficient way. You can get crazy on YouTube. There's the most efficient way to dry a plate or to wash a fork and all that stuff, where you just save 3 seconds by doing it in a different way. And it seems so dumb, but if you have to wash 100 of them, then you save a lot of time.
Yeah, I promise that this is one of those things where if you can incorporate this into your personal life, and once you do, you'll be so happy. There's a guy named Peter Main. I've talked about him before. He's a leather worker from Australia. He lives, I think, in Texas now, and he's just one of the most fantastic leather workers that has ever lived, in my opinion. And the thing that I'm most jealous of, beyond his actual leather work, is his workshop. This guy has the most beautiful workbench that I've ever seen. He's got basically 3 sides. He sits in the middle of these, and he's got, a U shape.
Oh, he's one of those, everything's in its place.
He's got every tool you can imagine, and it's dead in its place, and it's always perfect. And I hate him.
Yeah, those guys are the best, but man, do I hate them.
And every time I get, trying to organize my own workbench and everything, I think of that. And I just break down and cry and get depressed thinking that I'll never achieve that level of perfection.
It is unbelievable how some people's brains work like that.
Life is so much easier when things are in their place. Mm-hmm. They're there every time. And we're going to talk about a guy named Paul Akers later. I know that you guys have seen the toolboxes, for example, where everything has a slot for it.
Right.
So one of the things he suggests, is organizing your stuff like that so that when something's missing, right?
It's missing.
It's missing, and you can go and say, all right, who's got my tool? Where is it? Put it back.
Yep.
So that's very important, you know. So wasted motion is a big one. Okay, the next one is going to be waiting time, right? So that goes when things are not as they should be, you run out of stuff, and now you can't continue your production. You know, then people are idled. They're
Yep.
waiting. So try to set up your processes where you're reducing the amount of time that people are not actually doing something.
Yeah, I spend a large portion of my time waiting for programs to open or waiting on documents for clients or just waiting in general on silly stuff. So I try to figure out how to fill that waiting time with something else so I can at least be a little productive. But I guarantee most of my day is just waiting on something to happen.
Well, think about the people who wait on you, though, right?
Correct.
So for me, for example, if I'm looking for a certain file or something like that and I didn't put it in the right place, now I'm spending 10, 20, 30 minutes looking for this file that someone else needs
Yeah.
that I can't deliver to them because I didn't take the time to put it where it should have been.
Yeah, I forget what step we talked about that in, but that was a vital one. Just know how to save your documents, make sure they're in the right place. It's a nightmare when you have to find something.
Sure. And the number 8 one, which a lot of people in Lean think is the very most important one, is unused employee genius.
Yeah.
So basically, it's thinking about how the people that you work with, the people that are around you, the fact that they have brains and they think of things and you know they have ideas, and if you stifle them, you don't listen to them or you don't solicit their input and their ideas, then you'll never get the benefit of it. You know, there are companies out there that actively solicit tips from their employees, and they actually pay bonuses on that. And they say, and there have been times when employees in some of these places have been, you know, cut $100,000 check because their tip saved the company literally millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, at the last company I worked for before I started my own firm, we had a deal where you could email in your ideas to this email, and then they'd pick like the best ones and try to implement them, or and they'd give you like a little prize. But it was only like a $50 gift card, so I never gave them any of my best ideas.
And that's the next thing I wanted to talk about. So along those lines, right, is that the downside of offering a financial incentive is that then it's mercenary. Mm-hmm. Then people are going to withhold their ideas. They're going to, depending on the scale, or they may bank them. They may let something get worse so that their idea can fix it.
Yeah.
So the better way to do this is to create a culture of lean, where from the beginning people are on board with it and they understand it and they understand why that you do it, and it's encouraged.
Yeah.
And they're validated because of their ability to contribute to the company, just by keeping the company going and making sure that they have a good place to work and be. I mean, if you think of a standard 8-hour workday, right? We spend a third of our day or a third of our lives at work throughout the work week, right? So you would ideally like that to be as pleasant as possible, and not some place that you don't want to come to.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the first things that we do when we do consultations for businesses, I work with another group that goes in and really tries to cut out inefficiencies or reduce expenses to increase their marketing campaigns to increase revenue. But we do a whole kind of business consultation. And one of the first steps that I like to do is talk to all the employees. So I talk to everybody that I can within reason. If it's too big, it's impossible. But I try to talk to everybody and just say, what's going on in your job? How could it be better? What could we do to, decrease your workload or help you be more efficient? And just talk to those, middle managers, low-level employees. They have good ideas sometimes, especially because they're in the thick of it. Yeah.
The next thing we're going to talk about, in the next segment is kind of a book report on a American manufacturer who has adopted Lean and actually has grown that into a whole series of books and things like that on his take on Lean. And but one of the things that impressed him the most, you know, he's been to Japan several times. He's been over there to look at Toyota and Lexus and see all of the ways that they produce. But there's another company there that he was impressed by even more than Toyota. And just to put this into context, there are companies over there that are obsessed with lean to the point where they're trying to shave off, you know, tenths of a second or hundredths of a second off of a process.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it can be argued that might go a little too far.
Right.
But you know, be that as it may, you kind of need that sort of fanaticism because that shows you what is humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
And you can take any part of that you want. But if you take none of it, then you're guaranteed that you're going to be bleeding from these 8 forms of waste that we've identified.
Yeah, the 8 deadly sins of waste is what they call it.
Yeah, you are going to be losing money. Period.
For sure.
You're going to be losing money. You're going to be losing time. You're going to be experiencing more frustration than you should. And so that's why it's big for me to tell you, you know, to really dive into this topic a little bit more and figure out, you know, where these things can be applicable to the business that you want to start. Or if you're watching this and you already have a business, you know, how you can apply it. And know that it's not easy. You know, it's a lot of these requires a lot of habit changing. There's going to be a lot of convincing, you know, that has to be done with this. But as far as I can tell, the end result is always worth it if it's done, you know, sincerely and consistently.
Yeah, and those changes can be done incrementally as well. You know, you don't have to take huge swipes to try to cut your production time in half right away. You know, just save a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there. Then before you know it, you're great.
And I have to say, you know, I have to confess, you know, that as I looked around my workshop today and I was preparing for this episode, I realized how far off this wagon that I have personally fallen.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a good reminder, you know, that this is not a flavor of the month Band-Aid fix for a business, right? This is a culture that is worth getting into because it pays huge dividends.
Well, and you know, you mentioned that guy, the Australian leather maker, and you're upset when you think about his workshop. But in all honesty, you're never going to be that guy, and that's okay. It's all about just thinking about like, well, even if I want to emulate that, I know I'm not going to get there. But if I just take a couple little steps in that direction, or if I just change a couple little things to try to make myself a little more efficient, it's going to be for the better.
And that's true. That is out. That's what I was getting at. It's
right.
out. And if you did go into my workshop now, as messy as it is, I know where things are because I have incorporated these practices. Yeah. So I could tell you where to find a certain pair of pliers or something like that, and you would be able to do it based on my instructions.
Until your employee moves it or something.
Yeah, but they're, you know, but that's the point is that that I have incorporated some of it into the way that I go about doing things. Yeah.
And that's all it's about, just incorporating those little things every time to make it a little better.
Yeah, but that's basically all I had to say about this as far as it goes with just the lean kind of thinking and culture. And now we can move into the...
Yeah, well, I'm excited to hear about the next one. It's we're talking about the 2-Second Lean audiobook, which you told me to listen to. I did. Unbelievable. It's great, all the little tips. Again, I don't think I could implement everything he does, but a lot of it was very helpful.
So the next one is, as you mentioned, 2-Second Lean. That's a book by a guy named Paul Akers. Mm-hmm. Paul Akers owns a company called FastCap. FastCap is basically a small little end cap that you put on screws. So sometimes you'll see in some builds, cabinets and things like that, you'll see that you don't see any exposed screws.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So he makes the little
caps that go over
the screws, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of his first inventions, and then he's invented a couple other things. And he basically had a very good operation, lots of sales, production, lots of inventory, everything. and he had invited a couple consultants in to see if he could improve, just more or less, this is how good I'm doing, what can I do better? Right.
Yeah.
So he already had that continuous improvement mindset.
Right.
And he was surprised when the consultants told him, yeah, you have a great factory here, but you honestly don't know anything about production, and you're bleeding and you don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And at first he was taken aback by that, but he humbled himself and he said, okay, well, then tell me what you mean. And they started to explain lean to him. And they picked out a specific process that took them 8 hours to change over a machine to make a different product. So that was their turnover when they were going to produce a different product. And so the idea is that they had to produce so many of a product in order to justify that 8-hour machine change.
Right.
Right. And these guys said to him, they said, we can get that down to under 2 hours.
Okay.
And
that's a big jump.
Yeah, and they were confident that they could get it down even further, but they wanted to be conservative, and say,
which is always advised.
Give them that 2 hour.
Be conservative.
And sure enough, they got it down to less than 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul was sold at that point, on the lean concept.
Yeah.
So he started to learn more about it. He dove in. He took trips to Japan with these guys to go and learn about Toyota. And then he found that it was a little bit difficult to get his employees on board into the lean culture. So what he did was he came up with this idea where he just said, I'm just going to ask them to shave off 2 seconds off of whatever it is they're doing each day. And then we're just going to have a little meeting, and everybody will tell us, every morning they will say, what they did to save 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he knew that it wouldn't always be 2 seconds, of course, but it was a very easy way to kind of get people in the mindset. Instead of saying, save 5 minutes, you say save 2 seconds, and then by the time that they've gone through the whole methodology that's needed to save the 2 seconds, they've already saved 5 minutes.
Right.
And that sort of thing. And then they started to take a sense of ownership and a sense of pride on the things that they were doing.
Yeah.
And, more or less trying to one-up each other.
Right.
Be
a little bit better than their...
Right.
Their other employees.
And so that's how he got it to take root. So he wrote a book then called 2 Second Lean, where he explained these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is now, I guess, in its 3rd or 4th iteration, and he's added on to it as he's evolved and learned more things.
Yeah, and the audio version's free, isn't it?
The audio version is absolutely free. All of his books you can get on audiobook for free. I believe also that most of them you can even download a PDF for free. So you can buy the book in hardback or soft cover, or you can download the PDF for free if you want. And he's got a whole bunch of different resources, and he does he's turned himself through this into a thought leader in this space,
Mm-hmm.
Where now he goes around and gives talks and gives conferences, and hosts conferences on these things. And he tours other factories that are doing this and so on. And most of the places that he goes to are either small businesses like himself, or smaller, or even up to much larger businesses that are doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year.
Mm-hmm.
So he's never stopped, kind of incorporating all these things, and it's a whole lifestyle for that. So,
yeah, it really is. Yeah.
So again, this isn't something that everyone is going to incorporate. But like you said, if you incorporate some of it, then you'll be that much better off.
Yeah, just a little bit is all you need.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you just aim for 2 seconds, you might end up finding 5 minutes real easy.
Absolutely. Well, just to kind of, the book really is short chapters. It's an easy listen. It's about 4 or 5 hours to listen to it. There are, like you said, a lot of great tips in there. But the important part in the book is about just the conceptual, the mindset that you have to create. One one of the things that they did that really is a great success story, and he explains this in the book, that came through this whole lean thing, is when the economy crashed in 2008, his company supplies a lot of builders around the country.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously when the housing market crashes and then building goes down, right, that can drastically affect his sales. Well, they had a big company meeting and they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. So let's figure this out, and their first criteria was, we will survive, so let's figure out how to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But we will survive. We will not lay anybody off. We will not lower anybody's salary. So, those are big asks when your sales are tanking,
right,
because your customers are not able to build.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was they just started going through their factory and putting their lean practices into overdrive to make sure that they weren't wasting. They were cutting waste at an even greater pace, and they were able to do that. They were able to not lay anybody off, to continue operations, and they even got better because they saved so much in they cut so much waste and saved so much money that they were able to buy machinery that they had their eye on but couldn't afford because other places had gone out of business and were now selling their machinery at prices that they could pick up and get.
That's a bold move and a great company to work for, because most of the time layoffs are just the first thing on the order of business. When business start to go down, you start firing people.
Yeah, so that's another reason why I think that it would be important for any of you guys out there listening to go and listen to Paul's book or buy the book,
Mm-hmm.
or do both. There was a while there where I just would drive around in the car. Whenever I was driving, I'd have it on and I'd be listening to it. But for that alone, right, the fact that this guy was able to use these techniques to bring his company through one of the worst downturns in the history of our country without laying anyone off, is amazing.
Yep.
And so as a business owner, and I know you worry about this and I worry about it, the more people that work for us, the more you worry about what's going on with them, what's going to happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
at some point there's got to be a level where you stop knowing all of your employees so you don't have to care so much. But right now we only have a handful. So I know them, I know their kids' names, I know their families. It becomes a lot more pressure.
Yeah, but even at that, if I had 50 employees, and I didn't know them all, I'd still worry about it, like if my sales started to crash for some reason, I would genuinely be kind of worried about what's going to happen to them. Now I know people can go get another job, a lot of the times and things like that. But I would start to feel like that was kind of my failure for not anticipating it and being ready for it. Not being able to pivot, not being able to cut waste or whatever, you know what I mean? Look for other ways to do it. So I just am always inspired by that story in Paul's book, where he says, we didn't lay anybody off, and it was primarily due to the fact that he was at that point adopting these lean techniques so that he could say, I bet I can go and trim some more waste and save money and use that money to save my employees.
Yeah, I might have to go back and listen to it again, but it was definitely a worthwhile listen, and I definitely have tried to implement some of those, so highly recommend.
So just to let you guys know, the book is called 2 Second Lean by Paul Akers. That's Akers. We will have those links up on the screen and in the description. But that is something that I would recommend to any business person listening, regardless of the size of your business, regardless of how well you think your business is doing. You may be doing fantastic, and I'll bet you $1,000 that using the practices of lean, I can go into your business and find waste where you are leaking money and losing money, even if you're making great profits.
Yep. Almost every business has some waste.
So, if you've got a way to make your business even better, even more recession proof, then I think you should explore that. So 2 Second Lean by Paul Akers, very common sense way to go about it. Highly recommended. And don't be like me. Do it, incorporate it, be consistent, get your company on board, and any bit of it that you do will be helpful. But if you really go all in on it, then I think the benefit will be way greater. Had I been using these techniques, right, it's very likely that I would not even know you at this point, because I would have been doing the shit that I need to do
ahead of time.
I would not have gotten behind on my taxes and been afraid of going to jail and all the other shit that goes along. You well know my business is pretty good as far as, the profit, to the cost and so on. But what good is my business if I've lost now so many opportunities because of losing so much money to inefficiency and not getting stuff done that needs to get done?
Yeah.
How much further along could we be with the things that we're doing now if we had those extra resources?
It's a fair statement. Fair
So,
statement.
There you go.
Well, yeah. Check out the book. You get it on YouTube, yeah? The audiobook?
You can get it on YouTube. You can also download the audiobook. I've probably got it on my phone. I think I've transferred it, to every phone for the last 10 phones.
All right. Well, all those links will be in the description.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts for this week?
No, just good luck. Those of you who have made it all the way through and you're getting ready to start your business, send us your success stories.
Please do, yeah.
Send us your questions. Send us, just talk to us, and we'll try to help you out the best we can.
Yep, it's at Turtlesmith OK on all our socials, and then turtlesmith.com. And please like and subscribe. Thank you so much.
I'm so proud of you.
I know, right?
Good job.
Yeah, we probably should say that at the beginning, but at the end, if you made it this far, you better like it.
I know we feel icky
You better
when we
be
say
subscribed.
that, right? We feel icky like we're asking for these things, but
Yeah.
but that's folks, that's just the way the game is played.
It
We have to bow to the algorithm, and the algorithm likes it when there's likes and subscribes, because that tells them what to show you.
Yep.
And if you want to see more of us, then like and subscribe. The better we do, the better content we can bring you. And we would
excited.
like to have this relationship for forever. So there
We're
you go.
excited to help you make your business dreams come true. That's the goal.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we are going to go out and brave the snow and make our way home. And we'd like to say thank you again for spending time with us at Turtlesmith. And we wish you much success.
Well said.